Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're doing a deep dive into the precise covenantal mechanics mapped out in the book of Leviticus. And look, I know what you might be thinking. Ancient, dry rules. But we are going to leave that assumption at the door, because what we're actually looking at is a high-stakes cosmic rescue mission. We're talking sacred space, cosmic exile, and the very threshold of life and death. So let's get right into it.
First things first, we've got to clear up a major misconception. When modern readers look at the biblical protocols for what usually gets translated as leprosy, we fundamentally misread the text. We kind of assume it's this primitive medical journal, like ancient public health guidelines. But the biblical reality, it's completely different. This is not about a physical sickness at all. It is a cosmic crisis. We are talking about an ontological fracture. But to really grasp why, we have to understand the physical space where all this is happening.
Which brings us to Section 1, the camp as sacred geography. To understand this space, we have to look at the camp of Israel through what we call a mobile sanctuary lens.
Under this lens, the camp wasn't just, a bunch of nomadic tents out in the desert. It was literally a portable Eden. The whole architecture was an engineered covenantal environment, a ritual map of the heavens. It radiates outward in concentric rings. Right at the absolute center, you have the Holy of Holies, Yahweh's earthly throne room. And then moving outward, you've got the holy place, the outer court, and finally, the camp. Because this whole environment is built around God's presence, defilement isn't just a moral hiccup, it's a spatial crisis. Moving outward away from the center literally symbolizes separation from God.
And that helps us redefine our terms. The Hebrew word here is sara'ath. Like I mentioned, our Bibles often translate this as leprosy. But what it truly describes is an ontological fracture. It's this terrifying, visible intrusion of mortality, decay, and decreation right into God's perfectly ordered domain. Think of it as an anti-life entropy threatening that portable Eden. And because we're dealing with a cosmic legal issue here, God doesn't send in doctors to handle it.
That takes us to Section 2, guardians in cosmic exile. So if not doctors, who does God appoint to handle this cosmic threat? He appoints priests.
The priest actually functions as an epistemic guardian. Think back to Eden for a second. The fall was fundamentally a crisis of perception, right? Humanity decided to judge good and evil by their own intuition and sight, while the Levitical priest reverses that exact epistemological failure. As a guardian, he's strictly forbidden from diagnosing this cosmic condition based on his gut feeling or fear or even compassion. He has to submit his perception entirely to God's revealed Torah. He stands there as the ultimate defender of the covenant order and truthful perception. Now the priest patiently observes and waits, but eventually a verdict has to be rendered. So what actually happens when this epistemic guardian officially declares someone unclean? We're pivoting now from the safety of the sacred center to the terrifying reality of that verdict. The text in Leviticus 13:46 gives this devastating spatial mandate. He shall dwell alone. His dwelling shall be outside the camp. This is literally an Edenic expulsion. The unclean person is thrust outside the sacred space, crossing the boundary into the chaotic wasteland, which is the domain of the accuser. And they're commanded to tear their clothes and cover their face. These are ancient rites for mourning the dead. They are essentially embodying decreation, wandering around as a ritually dead exile, totally severed from Yahweh's life-giving presence.
Is incredibly bleak, but the biblical text does not just abandon the exile out there in the wasteland. And that brings us to Section 3. The threshold rescue mission. What happens when the exile is healed? Pay close attention to the spatial movement in Leviticus 14. The text explicitly says that the priest goes out of the camp. That is huge. The mediator of the covenant literally steps out of the safety of the sacred architecture, crosses the threshold into the chaotic wilderness, and meets the exile exactly where they are. It's a breathtaking rescue mission executed right at the boundary of reality.
Out there in the wasteland, the priest initiates a highly specific threshold event protocol, the two birds ritual. First, he slaughters one clean bird over living water, all inside a fragile earthen vessel. This profoundly unites sacrificial death, human fragility, and life. Then, he takes a living bird, along with cedar wood, scarlet yarn, and hyssop, and dips them into that blood and water mixture. Finally, he sprinkles the exiled person exactly 7 times, which signifies covenant completeness.
Then we have the climax of the ritual. The living bird is released out into the open field. This brilliantly illustrates the ultimate weight transfer. That substitutionary release means the contamination, the legal liability, the entire claim of exile, it is literally carried away from the human being. The barrier is broken. The exile can finally come home.
Moving to Section 4, restoring the sacred order, because just coming back across the boundary into the camp is really only the beginning. The goal is the 8th day, the day of new creation and total reincorporation at the tabernacle door.
What happens next is a beautiful piece of embodied theology. The priest takes the blood of a trespass offering and maps it directly onto the person's body, specifically on the tip of the right ear, the right thumb, and the right big toe. The person is being systematically reconsecrated. The ear is marked to hear Yahweh's word, the hand is marked to perform Yahweh's work, and the foot is marked to walk in Yahweh's ways.
But it definitely doesn't end with the blood. The sequence here is absolutely crucial. First, the blood is applied to answer for the legal liability of their cosmic exile. Then the priest takes holy oil and places it directly on top of the blood at those exact same 3 points: the ear, the thumb, and the toe. Why in that order? Because the animating spirit and consecration of the oil must rest on the firm foundation of the blood. The legal claim has to be settled first, then the spirit restores them to full cosmic participation.
And if you're paying attention to the wider canonical story, there is a staggering parallel happening here. This exact sequence, blood and oil on the ear, thumb, and toe, perfectly mirrors the ordination of the high priest in Leviticus 8. This person was literally a wandering, ritually dead outcast just days ago. Now, they are an active, consecrated agent of the sacred covenant, bearing the exact same ritual markers as Aaron himself. Absolutely wild.
Which leads us perfectly into Section 5, the Christological blueprint. This is where all these ancient narrative threads tie together.
This entire threshold protocol isn't just some ancient history lesson. It is the exact blueprint for the Messiah's rescue mission. Jesus Christ is the ultimate high priest who steps over the threshold. The book of Hebrews tells us he suffers outside the gate, outside the camp. He willingly leaves the sacred center, steps right into the wasteland of our cosmic exile, and completely absorbs the contamination of humanity to reverse the contagion of death.
As this quote beautifully summarizes, he reverses the contagion of death and restores exiles back to the presence of the living God. So you see, this explainer shows us that Leviticus is absolutely not a dry legal code. It is the blueprint of a heroic rescue mission. It's the story of a God who simply refuses to leave us to decay in the wilderness.
Which leaves us with one final, deeply personal thought. We've mapped out the cosmic geography, we've looked at the devastating reality of exile, and the lengths the epistemic guardian will go to step into the chaos and rescue us. So if the ultimate threshold has already been crossed by the Messiah to bring you home, where are you? Standing right now. Thanks for joining me for this explainer, and I hope this inspires you to keep digging into the depths of these incredible ancient texts.